Oi, oi, it's your boy, Jack Slack. This is the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming to you from deep within the MMA off-season. All this weekend's cards were light heavyweight led affairs, with extra light heavyweights down the card, and a ton of shit that you just didn't care about. Luckily, next week we have UFC 266, a decent pay-per-view at any rate. And Joshua versus Usyk, so stuff we can get into. But today we're going to be focusing on the stuff that happened over the weekend just gone. And there was some decent stuff in there. There was a lot of shit in there, but there was some decent stuff in there. Quite funny because we were talking about last week, either on the boycast or on the main cast, we were talking about, someone sent in the question, what techniques are going to be the next developments in MMA, and I said I don't know if you're going to see anything like the calf kick just coming out of nowhere and ruining people's shit, but I think the left hook, I said, was you're going to see guys applying the left hook better on the counter and just smoking people, because it's still something you see. Like if you get someone swinging and then you left hook them, you've got a great chance of starching them. It's having that confidence to step into range with the opponent and let them swing on you first. And wouldn't you know it, well, firstly, there was a really good left hook counter knockout on the UFC card, which was Arman Tsarukyan versus Christos Giagos. But in the main event, which is where we'll start, Smith versus Spann, both sloppy big bangers. Wouldn't you know it, like they're throwing, it was just like a lesson in how important the left hook is and is going to be, and how bad it is right now. Because both these lads came out, and as soon as they opened up with their right hand, they'd throw like a 1-2. The other guy would crack him with the left hook. Like, it turned Anthony Smith around first, then it knocked Spann silly, and then it hit Smith again, and then it knocked Spann down again. And then also they were throwing these long loopy left hooks, both of them throwing them really long and wide. And Spann got dropped with the right hand down the inside of one. So it was the opening for the left hook being exploited, and then also the openings in these crap left hooks also being exploited. Yes, not a great fight, but did show you how far the left hook has to come, and also like just how often the opening is there for it, because so few guys are closing the door, so many guys are selling out on their right hand, not moving their head afterwards, or closing the clinch, or even just covering up with your right hand. You know, if you watch someone like Canelo, when he ends a combination with the right hand, or he throws a quick 1-2, his right hand comes back high, like he's taking it off a hot stove. Like he's gone, ooh, and he lifts it really high, so his forearm covers the path of the left hook. But nobody doing that in MMA. So that was the main event. That's all you need to know about that. It was not great. I mean, Anthony Smith can be quite fun on the ground. He's not so great off his back, but he does go for stuff. Like he went for an over-the-back armbar with an overhook and sort of just fell off and ended up in guard, but luckily Spann was already wobbled, so he was able to get up. But then he was doing some nice stuff from the front head later on. Spann got two hands on one of his wrists, pushed it away, and that's when you can start getting up. You know, Nick Diaz and John Fitch both did that successfully against George St. Pierre. Just stay 2-on-1 on the wrist, go to turtle, start standing up. And by putting it one side or other of your head, you can encourage them to run round to the front headlock. But no, like Smith just, like Spann was so open with how far he put his hands out, pushing his hand away, that Smith was able to just put in his hooks and get on his back while his hand was being pushed in the opposite direction, which is, you know, it shouldn't happen, but it did. And then he got the choke, and then there was a lot of like shit talk afterwards, and it was weird because afterwards everyone was like, yeah, that's why Anthony Smith has headlined 8 UFC cards in the last 2 years or whatever. And you're like, no, nobody wants to watch Anthony Smith headline cards. That's just what they're doing. That's just how they're filling up these cards. Also, whenever there's someone drops out, they call Anthony Smith. But he is on like a 4-fight winning streak now or something like that. So yeah, you know, heading back towards title contention. I think everyone knows that the flaws are still there. And like, if you know, for as bad as John Jones has looked in his last couple, you know, even John Jones, you wouldn't give Anthony Smith even a chance against him. Like how comprehensively he was mismatched last time, or outmatched last time. There just hasn't been an awful lot of visible improvement in Anthony Smith. It's more that the division's just bad. But if we hop over to the Bellator division, we had Yoel Romero versus Phil Davis this week, and I was very cautious about this because I was almost at the point where I would pay to not watch Yoel Romero and Phil Davis in individual fights. Phil Davis, well, this is the thing. I was like, Yoel Romero is not going to do anything, and Phil Davis is the perfect opponent to not make him do anything because Phil Davis loves having crap kickboxing matches out at range. But in this one, I think by benefit of Yoel Romero actually counterfighting fairly effectively, Phil Davis was forced to do more and able to do more, and put a frantic pace on Romero, and was actually wrestling really well in the last round. It was very interesting because the first round was frustrating because Romero was doing his 52 blocks and not really doing anything, and then he was shoulder rolling right hands really well because Phil Davis was just throwing the 1-2 over and over again. Romero's rolling the right hand off, and then you're like, but do something with that, please. Because that's the thing. Like, Yoel Romero has trained himself to be a counterpuncher who doesn't do anything. And to be fair, he almost won the title in his last fight doing that because Izzy was so uncomfortable leading on him. But in this one, he was actually throwing back pretty well. But by the second round, third round, Romero's actually doing good work. Decent low kicks from both men. Romero using the shoulder roll, not really part of his game before. But as we said, cross guard, match it up with the shoulder roll as well. You got the complete Archie Moore two-stance thing going on there. And he was coming back in two-punch combinations by the second round, so I was very impressed. And Phil Davis was doing a good job of keeping himself safe, working well. It wasn't too terrible, actually. The only real downside was that they were sort of just getting cooking. Davis was taking over the fight in third. Romero had a really good round in the second, actually. First round was a bit tepid, but Davis was taking over the third really well with his wrestling. And then the fight was over, and you remembered, oh yeah, Bellator still doesn't do 5-round main events. It's just so crap in 2021 to not be able to do that. And now that's me saying that's crap because I would have enjoyed 2 more rounds. Yoel Romero saying that he thought it was still 2 more rounds is bollocks. There's no way he signed that fight and got all the way there and had the rules explained to him backstage by the referee and didn't at any point go, oh, you mean 5 rounds, right? But, I'd be remiss to talk about this without mentioning the time that actually did happen. K1 paid Sakuraba and Hoist to have a rematch after Sakuraba beat him famously in the Pride 2000 Grand Prix. They paid Hoist 10 times what they paid Sakuraba to show up, and then Hoist insisted for 3 rounds instead of 5, like on the night. And being K1 shifty fucks, they changed it on the night. So Hoist turned up, did the Inoki butt scoot and try and kick up at Sakuraba. Then the fight ended. Sakuraba was miming to the camera, wait, wasn't there 2 more rounds to go? And they announced the decision, and Hoist Gracie was like, yes! Family redemption! Having said that, there were 2 Gracies on the Bellator card, but we'll get into that in a minute. Returning to the UFC card, while I do hate all light heavyweights and the light heavyweight division, there were actually a couple of light heavyweights. Oh, I said this last week with the guy on the Contender Series. What was his name? But he was good. And then immediately they booked him into a fight. So it clearly is just like, get the cheapest fighters in as quick as possible. Contender Series is shady as fuck. But on the UFC card, you had a ton of other big boy fights. Ion Cutelaba versus Devin Clark. Heartbreaking. The worst person you know won a fight. Ion Cutelaba rebounds from about 4 years of matches and rematches with Magomed Ankalaev. Fights Devin Clark. Devin Clark, sort of like one-note fighter. I mean, throws up lead leg high kicks, which is rare enough at light heavyweight. He just doesn't really do anything with them. Amazing. Go watch the clip of him versus Jan Blachowicz because he's the only person I've ever seen old British and American books that are like learn jujitsu, the art of the samurai, or jujitsu for women, secrets from the Orient. They always have someone swing a punch, stepping with it, and then the other guy steps back and it glides past him, and then he wraps the arm around the neck and he does the Japanese stranglehold or the rear naked choke as we know it nowadays. And you only see that in books and in Steven Seagal films, but Devin Clark is the only man I've seen have that happen to him in actual MMA. He swung a punch at Jan Blachowicz on the fence, missed, and Blachowicz just grabbed him around the neck and choked him, standing, no hooks. Hilarious. But Devin Clark, anyway, he comes out, does decently in the early going, and then he gets dropped with sort of a overhand behind the neck. And then it just goes downhill from there. Like, he had his teeth smashed. Basically, like, the gum had moved. It was fucking horrible when he showed his teeth. Yeah. I mean, everyone wears a gum shield, but like that only really protects your front, your top row of teeth. Your bottom row of teeth are still ungum shielded. Yeah, this was just Cutelaba putting on a beating. Using takedowns, being successful with them too. Honestly, like, I think I was impressed by this one because Cutelaba so often is just a monster in the first. Immediately the second starts and he's like, oh no, shouldn't have let it get this far. And he just goes downhill from there as he pants and gets, effortlessly taken down. But here he was in control throughout. Devin Clark kept getting mounted and then he'd go belly down and Cutelaba would start like working up towards either towards his back, trying to flatten him out, or go over the top for an armbar. Every time Devin Clark was able to slip out the back door. Yeah, we talk about that like sometimes it is worth doing what is in jiu-jitsu the worst thing you can do. Go for give back up for a mount because you're giving them a load of points for probably a lower chance of escaping. But in MMA, where it's all slippery and dudes just aren't that great at controlling, or dudes just aren't that focused on controlling, you can firstly get them to dive on a submission attempt when previously they'd be punching you in the face, and secondly, you've got a great chance of popping out the back door between their legs. And he did. Devin Clark did that multiple times, even while getting beaten up. He went back to his corner. He's like, oh, my gorilla's fucked. And his dad was like, well, can you keep fighting? Do you want to? And Devin Clark's like, yes, I do. And he goes, oh, well, go fight then. Which I thought was a decent way to do it. Because like a lot of the time when you see dads in corners, you're like, are you going to get your son killed because you're living vicariously through him? But no, I think he handled that very well. He was like, do you want to fight? Can you fight? He didn't say, you should fight or you need to go out there like a warrior. He seemed concerned for his son, but not in a way that like, because that's the other down, like you either have a dad who's like willing to let you die in the ring, or you have someone who's going to get too involved emotionally in the corner. I think that's one of the things about a good coach is that they do care about you, but they're not going to let you fuck your life up. It's that balancing act. And I say that, but there aren't that many that actually can walk that line. You see far too many guys who will let their fighter like go out on their shield. When you're like, what does he benefit from that? At this level, if you're in the UFC and you're getting beaten to death like Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira or JDS versus Kane, what does it benefit him to like know that he can go through hardship? At that level, he's already had hardship if he got to that level. People will have stunned him. He'll have gassed out in fights. It doesn't really help to get your shit pushed in. So respect to Devin Clark for going through with it. I mean, his corner could have stopped because his teeth were fucked up. But yeah, he was live. He popping out the back door trying to do stuff. Last few minutes, he landed a couple of decent punches, which, if I were looking at this fight and I was going, well, you just need to weather the storm because it's Ion Cutelaba and he does slow down, that would give me a great a boost in confidence if I could see that Devin Clark was scrambling out from these positions and eventually getting back to his feet. But that was not a fight I was particularly interested in talking about. I just thought the father-son dynamic was interesting. Fights I did want to talk about. Right, Joaquin Buckley was on this card against Antonio Arroyo, and I really got thinking during this fight, how would I, in an ideal world, if you could just like transpose skills onto Buckley, how would I work his build the best? Because he's so short in that middleweight division. He's always being towered over by us. Like Kevin Holland is an obvious, Kevin Holland was at middleweight, yeah, but Kevin Holland's an obvious example where he was just like, Kevin Holland's slowly leaning away from him as he's charging in, and he just can't quite reach him. And Arroyo here was like dwarfed him. Clearly like a stocky, powerful guy, so I don't know if getting to welterweight is an option. But and to be honest, he might not want to. I think if you have success and you can knock people out at that weight, why take more out of yourself in the pre-fight to get there? So I was wondering, like, how would I best make use of that, of his build and his physical attributes, by changing his tactics up. And yeah, because he was doing this, like, his corner are always saying to him, don't walk in, work in, and they're always saying to get aside. And what I presume they mean is to either slide, because he's a southpaw, either slide down the outside of the lead leg or take the inside angle and come inside on the lead leg, but don't just meander forwards. And meandering forwards is where, like, you, like, the lead knees almost act as barriers to keep each other out. So it's a little bit easier for the guy who doesn't want to be closed in on to keep range. And what you saw with Arroyo and Nchukwi is just sort of like trying to move off and kick. And Arroyo had clearly watched the Nchukwi fight. He tried to do it. Nchukwi fight lasted like 15 seconds, so it wasn't like a long-term strategy. But Arroyo was circling off, trying to kick him every time he came in, hitting the body with kicks really well, trying to throw the kicks upstairs too. And Buckley's corner was saying, do not lean, don't slip deep, which is obviously good advice. You don't want to lean into a head kick, especially if you're already low down near their head kick. So I was watching this and going, how would I better make use of this? Because we were talking last week specifically about, like, when you're the shorter man, there's two options. You can make them come to you and then, drop away, come back in over the top, or meet them, slip inside and meet them. Or you can try and put yourself inside on them, but then they're probably going to be moving away. So you've either got to chase them down and crowd them, or let them extend to you and step inside. And an example I gave of both was Manny Pacquiao against Margarito. When he's putting together two-fisted punching flurries, he's up in Margarito's grill, he's inside his reach, he's really working well. And then when he steps back, or when they're out in the open, because he's got this huge reach and height disadvantage, he's then stepping back and letting Margarito overcommit and coming back with blows over the top or underneath. But I think Buckley might be able to learn a bit from with this height dynamic is Saenchai, who does an amazing job, particularly fighting bigger opponents, and he does it almost exclusively on the end of their range. And then when they do a kick, or he can draw a kick out of them, he slides back, or he catches the kick, or parries it across. Takes it on the arm and parries it across, and then he bursts in and does great work in little bursts. So he really doesn't even enter their striking range, or try and enter their striking range. He draws them out and then makes them overcommit and goes in afterwards. I think that's something that Buckley could benefit from with all these guys who are trying to circle off and kick him. I think he gets dinged a bit trying to chase people down, especially if you don't want to slip too much, because obviously if you're an orthodox fighter against another orthodox fighter, you can probably move your head a bit without worrying too much about the right high kick coming up while it's happening. The opponent would have to switch or pick up their lead leg, and it's a little bit harder, But if you're southpaw versus orthodox in that open stance sort of matchup, every time you dip to your left, which is the more natural way to dip, if you're an orthodox fighter, you dip to your right a lot, because you're going into your stance, basically you're keeping on top of your weight. But yeah, if you're a southpaw versus an orthodox, as soon as you lean into your left, that kick is coming right up at you, and it's travelled over a good distance too. But Buckley's got this interesting thing. Like, I thought his corner was doing really good on advice, because they clearly put a lot of thought into how to deal with these very noticeable height disparities. And they were asking for him to establish the low kicks and then either punch into low kicks or kick and then throw punches afterwards, which I liked. We talk a lot about, like, you don't have to be the better kicker to benefit from using the low kicks. And he was doing a really nice thing where he was moving in, and as Arroyo jabbed, or when he felt like Arroyo might jab, he dipped down to his right side, so outside of Arroyo's lead shoulder, and then he'd come in with a right hook to the body, like open elbow. So like a normal lead hook, not like closed elbow. Oh, fucking shovel hook. I'm going to say shovel hook. But not like a normal dig to the body, like quite a wide dig. And I was going, that's a weird punch. It doesn't look like it's doing a lot. But then, wouldn't you know it, third round, he lands a really good one upstairs just before the knockout. I mean, he knocked him out with I think it was right hook, but that was in like a weird sort of car crash exchange. But just before that, he dipped in to go to the body, and he came up with the right hook to the head instead, and had him stumbling. I think one of the things I'd really like to see him do more is throw the left straight to the body, and also and to the chest, especially. Guys, like especially short guys, when you're saying use your height to your advantage to hit the body, what you really mean is like punch in front of your shoulders. Your shoulder is where your in front of your shoulder is where your reach is greatest. If you're punching down, you're still giving up a little bit of reach. So if you punch level with your shoulder and your shoulder is like level with their chest, when we say hit the body, just punch them in the chest. Or punch them in the fucking chest, as Ray Longo would say. But yeah, he got the knockout. He dinged him with a weird right hook. I think as the guy was trying to knee him, and then he hit him with a follow-up right uppercut and hurt him, or like sent him to the mat. Another awesome knockout for Joaquin Buckley. Great hitter, working around his build, and I think it'd be really interesting to see him continue in the future. And that brings me on to a fight that was earlier in the night, but I watched it later, and I was going like, how would you deal with this, big height disparity, blah, blah, blah. And then I saw a guy do it really well, and it was Tafon Nchukwi did an amazing job against Mike Rodriguez. And it just, like, when you watch combat sports, it's so nice to watch people do stuff that you don't think is being done well enough. And when no one's doing something, or no one's really like standing out for this one thing, it's very easy to be like, well, maybe it just doesn't work. But we're always fucking saying clinch work and elbows and striking from the clinch. And Nchukwi battered Mike Rodriguez by cutting the ring on him. Not, he wasn't great with his feet, but cutting him off, putting him to the fence, battering him with knees and elbows, freeing his knees and elbows with like head posts, bicep ties. Even on the ground, like a bicep tie is when you know what an overhook and underhook are. An underhook is where you get your arm underneath the opponent's armpit and you're hugging them with the arm under the armpit. An overhook is if you are the guy who the other guy is in their armpit. The overhook is wrapping over that arm. A bicep tie is a longer sort of range weapon or not longer range control than that. It's where you keep your elbow tight and you cup your hand over the opponent's bicep and tricep. Thumb out, thumb in, doesn't matter. But like it's very common in wrestling because it's sort of when you're reaching for each other's heads, the bicep tie comes in there. But in Muay Thai, you will see guys with the gloves on still using the bicep ties, getting the hand inside the bicep, like forcing the elbow out a bit, and then from the bicep tie they'll turn their elbow over and hit the guy in the head. And both of these guys were doing that. And Nchukwi, he got him down in the first round, I think it was. He was in half guard. He had the underhook on the side that his leg was trapped, so he was ready to start passing. And he used his free hand to bicep tie Rodriguez's bottom hand. Rodriguez started trying to like get his hand away, because that's what you do when someone grips you. You go like, you take your hand through whatever range of motion you feel like is going to free it. And as he's like winding his arm away from his body, Nchukwi just turns it over and elbows him in the head because his arm's miles away from his head. He can't protect himself. Really cool. And then there was a great one on the fence. Nchukwi's on him, and Rodriguez has his back to the fence, and he gets the bicep tie, and he's about to turn over the elbow. And Nchukwi knows. So instead of like standing there and letting it happen, he just puts his ear on Rodriguez's ear, and the elbow can't come all the way across. That's the crazy thing about elbow fighting. Basically, it all works around the rule that you can't lick your own elbow. Like if you try now, if you try and lick your own elbow, you can't. There's quite a bit of distance between your mouth and your elbow. And if someone's head is up against your head, it's in that space. It's between your face and the end of your elbow. And so you just crowd people, put your head on them, make a little bit, but it means you also have to make space when you want to elbow them. So you have to post your head on them. You have to get bicep ties, and it was just all that jockeying for position. And Nchukwi was throwing big bombs on the feet, like wide swings, but then he'd grab a collar tie and come in with an elbow afterwards. Love that. We were talking about Arroyo doing that the other night. Uppercut, left hook. When the left hook lands, like you slap it behind their head, you open your hand, you drop your elbow and you grab them behind the head, and then you hit them with the right elbow afterwards. Then I was saying just the other day about how Muay Thai style would be amazing in MMA, but also would get them killed. I said don't adopt that style, even though he's one of my favorite fighters. Muay Thai, which is Muay Thai, but with an NG on the end of Muay instead of Y. He was he a Lumpini Stadium Fighter of the Year or something like that? He was Fighter of the Year in somewhere. And all his knockouts ever have come from elbows. He either goes to the decision or he knocks you out with an elbow. But he's really good at the sort of up elbow, which is really more of a forward elbow. Are they spearing elbows? I forget the names in Muay Thai. But basically where you put your elbow out in front of you and then you punch it straight in, like you would a straight punch. He's amazing with those. Obviously, you've got like 4 inches of effective striking distance in there, but he can knock dudes spark out cold with it. And Nchukwi landed a couple of those at various points. Rodriguez has a fucking chin on him. Like he's not a great wrestler. He couldn't stay off the fence, but he took some flush elbows right on the end of the chin and just didn't even, like, he no-sold him. He was Hogan being body slammed. And then what I really liked was Nchukwi, like, if you watch the end of the first round, he takes a step back, lets Rodriguez get going, and steps in to meet him with a counter elbow and then grabs the clinch. We're always talking about elbows and elbows and knees because they have such a short effective range. You know, there's a very small window where you hit a knee and it's not like your thigh lands and your knee doesn't, or you fall short. There's a very small window there. So the best times to do things like that are when you know the opponent's not stepping back. Number one, when they're at the boundary, the ropes or the cage. Number two, when they're already stepping in. So if you watch someone like Nate Corbett, who's awesome with counter elbows, it's always, as the opponent steps in, he steps in to meet them because he knows that they can't back up. And then when Nchukwi got the clinch, he also hit a beautiful, Muay Thai sweeper, Sasai Surakomiashi, if you're a judo nerd. The Matt Brown sweep, if you're an MMA guy. And it's so fucking useful. It's like Matt Brown, whenever he got a hold of someone's head, or he started elbowing them, or he had like one collar tie, or he had an over-under, you could basically do it with any grips. Because, I mean, in judo, they do it with the gi. But you pull the opponent forward so that they step with one foot, or they have to step as you step off to the side slightly, and you pick up the foot that's on that side that they're going to step to, and you just place it on their shin. So that where they would have stepped to, they can't step to, and they fall over. That's literally, I mean, that's how a trip works. You move their center of gravity, and you stop them from stepping. And the great thing about it, like, you see guys from all sorts of backgrounds do it. Islam Makhachev did it like 3 or 4 times to Arman Sarukian. But the great thing about it is that you don't really have to commit to anything. You're just pulling the opponent so that they step. And those steps happen all the time in clinches anyway. And you're not committing anything. You're not dropping on their hips. You're not going to end up in this shit exchange where you can't do anything. And that's the value of it for someone like Matt Brown or Nchukwi here. You're trying to hold on to the guy and elbow him in the head or hit him with knees. You know, you've got a loose clinch. The opponent wants to either break away, which is hard, or like close in, smother, and make it a full clinch. You know, where they've got their arms around your underhooks or something like that. You want to hold and hit. They want to cuddle. And the great thing about that, the sweep, is that the moment the opponent starts getting control of you and you're not really free to get off elbows and knees, you do the sweep. Maybe they fall on their face, maybe they fall on their back, you end up on top hitting them, or they take a big step, you've got space to make the clinch longer again and start punching, or kicking, or kneeing, or whatever you want. It's such a cool move. Everyone in the world should be learning how to do Sasai Surakomiashi. You don't need like the super deep details of someone who's excellent at it, in judo, but you know, you need to be able to do it at like a passable level, because that's the point. It's just a threat. It's like, oh, you need to worry about falling over now. Oh, I'm kneeing you again. So I was so impressed with Nchukwi, and then by the last round, because I was going like, oh, I like how he's using his punches to just sort of push Rodriguez to the fence and get on him, you know, throwing wide blows and then grabbing a hold of the head afterwards, but creating clinches from those swinging combinations or you know, flurries of swings. But then in the last round, he's actually parrying, coming back with counters and landing them. So I was really impressed by this guy. He did slow down a bit because obviously he's bricked up as fuck. He's a muscly dude. And he's got quite a labour-intensive style because he's going after the guy and putting his strength into him. But it's something that we're always talking about. Striking from the clinch is underrated. Using the fence to create infighting opportunities. I was saying, like, John Jones, if you watch how he completely diffused Glover Teixeira, you know, he boxed Glover Teixeira up on the inside. Everyone was like, oh, you can't be on the inside with Glover Teixeira, you'll get hit. You can if you're pushing him into the fence and his feet are straight underneath him. You know, he literally can't generate any power. And your head's against his, so he can't punch you because, you know, your head's next to his. And that fight happened ages ago. He did it to DC as well. He did it to Gustafsson at bits. You know, he's done it to a lot of guys. And still no one is doing this. You know, you saw bits of Volkanovski doing it from time to time. Nate Diaz had success, like, pushing to the fence and then freeing his hands against Conor McGregor in their second fight. But people could be building their whole style around that, and no one's doing it. Everyone's, you know, too busy being like, the calf kick is what I've got to master now. So yeah, Nchukwi, I mean, if you didn't get it from like the 50% of the podcast so far that I've been raving about Nchukwi. I really liked that. I also thought, like, sometimes when a fighter loses, it's very easy to go like, oh, his corner did a shit job. They gave him a bad game plan. But Rodriguez's corner were giving him the right advice at every point. Like, they were saying, do not knee, do not elbow, move off the fence. Oh no, they said you can elbow, but they said don't knee, don't punch. If your back is to the fence, don't do those things, because that's just letting him press into you. You're standing there and you're giving him what he wants. You should be moving, hit the odd elbow if you can, and then work when your back is off the fence. And obviously he wasn't able to keep his back off the fence for very long, but they were giving him the right advice, because the moments that it really went south for him were when his back foot was on the fence and he was like, oh, I'm going to make a stand here. And you're like, that's never what you want to be doing, because you making a stand there, if you don't knock him out that time, you're going to convince yourself the next time that you're going to make a stand and knock him out this time. And really, you should be thinking about, I need to do this, circle off, create room every time. What else have I got written down from the card? Actually, on the subject of elbows and knees, timestamps are going to be all over the place for this one. On the subject of elbows and knees, one of the things I really liked that Phil Davis was doing against Yoel Romero, he got him down in half guard, sitting on the top leg, as we always do. He's trying to put his knee on Romero's arm to get that sort of semi-crucifix, the Team Quest special. But his corner are screaming, knee, 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 knee. And it takes Phil Davis a minute to realise what they're talking about. And they're talking about, when you're in half guard, use the knee, the leg that's free, knee them in the body, because they're going to be defending their head. Because we know from half guard, you sit on the leg, you elbow the head. So if their arms are up defending their head, you can knee them in the body with the free knee. And Davis landed some lovely shots to the body with the knees. And then when they went to the turtle later, I think he had the front headlock, or he moved around to the side or something like that. And he was hanging on him and he was hitting him with knees in the ribs again. It's so powerful and nobody's doing it. And if you're a top tier wrestler, you should be doing it. You should be making people go to the turtle, like a lot of top tier wrestlers are. And then you should be keeping them there and trying to knee them. So what else was going on? Oh, in the UFC, you had your Sarukian versus Yagos fight, which we did say was a bit strange. There is a lot of this, like, oh, no one wants to fight Sarukian, which is the stuff that they were always claiming about Islam Makhachev. I can understand that, but I mean, Yagos took a fight. It was and honestly, he gave it a good effort, because right from the start, Sarukian moved in towards the fence and he shot on a good double. It looked like, he got a good penetration step, did it quick, changed level very quick. And Yagos hipped into him, hit him with his hips, and just turned him over and ended up in top position. It was very impressive takedown defense by Yagos. And then he ended up on top of Sarukian by the fence in Sarukian's butterfly guard. So Sarukian had his feet inside of Yagos's thighs, in his inseams, basically. And that's a really useful... I mean, in jiu-jitsu, it's useful for sweeping because you can elevate the guy. But in MMA, it's useful because you can start standing up a lot easier. And what you saw was Yagos, he kept Sarukian's back flat to the mat, and he got up on his feet, and he pummeled his knees to the inside, so he put himself in closed guard, which, if you look at it in a very old-fashioned way, like, oh, don't get stuck in closed guard, but that's a better way to keep someone on their back than chilling in their, than butterfly guard, where they've got these two loaded springs under you, and they can get up to a hand really easily and start scrambling. So I thought that was a really cool touch too. And you saw Sarukian open his guard again and slide a hip out and get a butterfly hook back in, hit a lovely stand-up, turned off the fence, broke away, started doing the Sarukian stuff. Like, they're always raving about how Sarukian is, really well, is really experienced wrestler and kickboxer. But kickboxer can mean a billion things. And whatever Sarukian's style of kickboxing is, it's a bit weird, because basically all he does is jab and throw the lead high kick. But yeah, he was doing that. Yagos came in for a couple of good punches, and he got hit with a counter left hook again. Guys, their right hand is away from their chin. It just happens. It's perfect. It swung in, hit him clean, knocked him down. And that was basically the end of the fight. So another great performance from Sarukian, who now has like 4 wins in the UFC. Over, decent guys, but the problem is that he hasn't been able to fight that often. But hopefully, a bit of a change to that soon. What else have I got down here? Pennington versus, what's her name? Kianzad. This was, I hate Raquel Pennington's fights generally, but this was a bit, it was all right, actually. It was cool because it was like a clinch fight where there was a lot of work being done always, But at the end, like, Raquel Pennington was like, oh, sorry, people just always want to clinch with me. She initiated every clinch. Like, she'd land a good jab and then duck into the clinch along the fence. And then, yeah, that was the whole fight. Didn't watch Ariana Lipski versus Mandy Bohm, because why would I? Nate Maness versus Tony Gravely was interesting. This was another sort of like lead hooks, counter lead hooks. They're a problem. But this fight was fun because it was like they used to, or certainly at one point, when important fights were being broadcast over the radio. So Jim Jeffries versus Jack Johnson is probably the best example. They would have the radio play in like movie theaters or vaudeville theaters, and then they would have two actors acting out what was going on, which I think would help this podcast, to be honest. But this, to me, was like someone playing Eddie Wineland in Nate Maness versus someone playing Eddie Alvarez in Tony Gravely, the Battle of the Eddies. Just something about them when they came out in this fight. Like, Maness moved and did all, like, it wasn't quite Eddie Wineland. It was like sort of a half-hearted impression of Eddie Wineland. And Gravely was there bobbling, and the camera was behind him, and he had this big back like Eddie Alvarez. It just struck me like that for some reason. But this was another example of our old contention that when both fighters are changing stances, everything gets a bit weird, because guys get used to changing stances against one stance of the opponents, and they're like, I'm the changing factor, I'm the mystery, I'm bringing the questions. As soon as they both start switching, they lose track of what they're supposed to be doing and just get hit with weird like right hand leads that they wouldn't otherwise. At the end of the first round, Gravely from orthodox, he throws a 1-2. The punch falls short, but he steps in behind it and he stays southpaw. And then he opens up with a right hook just as Maness is about to throw something back, knocks him down, round ends, comes out for the second round. He tries the same thing. As Maness comes in on him, he steps back, shifts back from orthodox into southpaw, and then he covers up and he's about to throw the right hook back, and he gets hit with the punch that he basically countered last time. So just, yeah, everyone changing stances all the time ends in crazy fashions. Though everyone should be changing stances all the time, I'm just saying, it gets weird. People were raving about Zhu Rong. I thought it was okay. Mainly I was unimpressed with Brandon Jenkins. Like, they were raving about how he's a striker mainly, and he was doing like very weird things. He's just throwing like wild left hands and walking off to the side, even before he was tired. Might have had like a big adrenaline dump because of the nerves. You know, you warm up backstage, then you get out there and there's loads of, and it's the biggest stage of your life and stuff. So yeah, possibly, but yeah, he just looked very herky-jerky, but not in the effective way. And the other thing is that Zhu Rong came in like 3 pounds overweight, you know, and I'm not going to rave about someone as a prospect if they come in massively overweight. Anything else worth talking about? Oh, Neyman Gracie was on the Bellator card against a guy who, I mean, we said it last week, but like an overmatched guy. The guy was like number 200 in the world, and Neyman Gracie is, you know, in a respectable position in the world. But yeah, he did box him up, which is the surprise. You know, people expect Neyman Gracie to submit people. He came out, jabbed him well, hit him with a bus driver uppercut, got him near the fence, flashed the jab, then he said, guess who's going to jail tonight? And he hit him with the bus driver uppercut. And it was cool. I just found it so funny. I mean, actually, Sal Rogers also won a fight on this card, but I didn't watch that. So I'm going to watch that after this. And then I've got a Rising card to watch after this as well, which is double hard because Rising is like firmly a D-League organization now. But the king of Bellator, just the most passionate Bellator fan I've ever seen. But he does tend to convince himself of things that just aren't true. He was going on about like how Bellator doesn't need a contender series because they have an exclusive roster of 250 brilliantly talented fighters stocking up all their cards. And literally a day later, this Gracie, Raffon Gracie, I think it was, who has an 0-2 record and last fought in 2007, is on the Bellator televised card. And he lost. Just bizarre. But I tell you, if I were running Bellator, things would be a little bit different. Which brings us to the question that I posted on a whim on my Twitter today. How would you make Bellator less shit? And we got some good answers, we got some serious answers, we got some funny answers, we got some delusional answers. Someone said rename it Fellator, so it's just for the fellas. Have them merge with Ryzen, which I suppose they basically have, because any Ryzen fighter that's good enough, they'll say we want them, and they can fight in Bellator. Scott says, I'd leave the coaches in the back room. It's best when fighters make natural mistakes and take more risks because they weren't told by the coaches to circle, stall, clinch. Put human element into it, mono versus mono. I don't know if that's satire, but I hope it is. Matt says, look towards the likes of PFL and try to create a point of difference from the other promotions. Maybe cut down the prelims and have a feeder promo like Dana White's Contender Series or Tough to build hype around younger prospects as opposed to old former UFC guys. I think that's probably a pretty good answer, actually. Having these enormously long prelims, which, just don't matter at all. And you could put on 4 fights on every event and have them be good. Mind you, the televised card is like 5 fights, 6 fights long, and it's still largely not good. Steve says ramp up the production. Mitch says baby oil and roids. Well, I don't know. I watched their main event yesterday. Failing that, shift to ensuring the cans they hire have a special talent. Brackets, dancing, magic, or whatever, to keep crowd entertained while their star talent backs towards the cage. These regional middleweights can struggle even at championship level. Sarang says try to get into more countries and increase viewing options online. That sounds good, actually. People from not America are always raging about how hard it is to watch Bellator. Same old Sam says, less talking heads, strip down the commentary team. Oh my God, was this noticeable on this one. Just throwing it back to the booth every 10 seconds. I love Mauro. Big John is the worst commentator in MMA. Just atrocious. I don't need to hear from Josh Thompson every 10 seconds. Big John, like the first takedown that Phil Davis hit on Yoel Romero was a well-timed double leg under a Yoel Romero punch. And Big John goes, well, that's because they've got different styles of wrestling. Phil Davis has that folk style wrestling, and Yoel Romero has that freestyle wrestling. It was a well-timed double leg under a punch. That's not even wrestling, that's MMA. What the fuck are you talking about, you strange dude? Just flapping his gums for the sake of talking. MMA Jakey says get rid of it, a sentiment that's echoed a lot in these ones. Grumpy Samurai says MVP fighting someone legit. He's fighting Douglas Lima, who is very flawed. We understand he's flawed now, but is legit. I was in London the other day. They got those up on the tube, big posters for that card, for that fight specifically. Actually, Drew says sign more Gracies. That is the Scott Coker approach. Bast says actually promoting their fighters, building stories around fights to get people involved. Flood social media with quality content. Give us a reason to care about another promotion. I know my time is limited. Why should I give some of it to Bellator? I think that's a sentiment that we all feel. Everyone says that because Rumble dropped out of their light heavyweight tournament this week due to health issues, which he's alluding to being more serious than just COVID or something like that. And obviously, people speculate wildly because he ballooned up to 300 pounds as a bodybuilder, and you can get all into that, like how bad that is for you. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, like speculating about a guy's health issues. But the thing was, like, whenever that happens, or someone gets kicked in the dick in a main event, and everyone goes, "Oh, Bellator, they're so cursed," and you're like, "No, they're only cursed because there are 15 good fights they make a year that you care about." And, a good number of them fall through. If you made more good fights every year, instead of all these ones, just showcase matches for your talents, and then 0-0 versus 0-0 guys on the rest of the card, there would be more chance of good fights making it through without being cancelled. People forget, like, the UFC cancellation rate is something like a third of fights that get booked get changed. Lots of people saying change the name, because it is bad. White Hamilton says give one guy a gun. Heel Hook says hire Cage Warriors matchmakers and focus on signing enough talent to fill up the rankings. Brackets, Charlie Ward at number 6 is criminal. Also get Frank Mir on commentary instead of Big John. I actually like all of those ideas. Cage Warriors is not on the level of the UFC. Bellator is not on the level of the UFC, but they have a good amount of world-class talent. Cage Warriors somehow manages to make compelling matchups on every card they do. And that's not like they're British, so aren't they Irish? Fuck, I can't remember what Cage Warriors is. I'm not just supporting them because they're like a European local one. I'm saying like, if there's nothing going on one weekend and there's a Cage Warriors, I'm quite happy to watch it. When they do like 3 events one weekend, I will watch them. They put on good matchups. And a lot of the time, I don't know the people in them. They just manage to match them up well. In Bellator, you still watch it, and it's like a load of 0-0 guys, and then like a 5-0 guy fighting a 7-14 guy to build up the 5-0 guy. Anyway, that's enough moaning about Bellator. We have some interesting stuff going on this week. I'm finishing my Aldo preview piece. I'm finishing my Aldo Advanced Striking 2.0 because I got back into it and it's fun. That's I don't have to lie about that. I don't know if I will write something about Ortega now. I might just talk about it extensively on the next podcast. But we got Ortega versus Volkanovski coming up at the weekend. We've got a Dana White Contender Series before that, and they're normally quite fun. I've been talking about those on the Boycast a lot. But Volkanovski versus Ortega, Shevchenko versus Murphy. Meh. You love it when I moan about Valentina Shevchenko. You got Lawler versus Diaz, which gives us a chance to get nostalgic. You got Curtis Blades versus Rosenstruik. You got Andrade versus Calvillo. Marlon Moraes versus Dvalishvili. Hooker versus Haqparast. Dan Hooker just got his visa approved today. Couple of heavyweights. Roxanne Modafferi's around. Medic versus Turner. You know what? That card, that card is basically the last 4 weeks of fights in the UFC. They took the good fights and put them on that card. It's just, it's not got a Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier or a Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker or anything like that, but it's got some good fights on, and I'm proper psyched to talk about that. So I will be back for the Boycast on Wednesday, Thursday, and if you want to sign up to the Patreon, support the podcast, get the Boycast, read all the articles I write, do. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack, retaining semen for the last few weeks so I can have a blowout moaning about Shevchenko on Thursday. Bless.